In the heart of a war-torn France, amidst the chaos of the Hundred Years' War, a teenage girl from a humble village stepped forward, claiming to hear the voice of God. She wore men's armor, wielded a banner, and possessed a conviction so fierce it would turn the tide of a century-long conflict. But was she a divine messenger, a military prodigy, or a heretic destined for the flames? The story of Joan of Arc is more than just history. It's a legend of faith, courage, and a brutal, tragic end that has fascinated the world for 600 years. Join us as we uncover the true story of the farm girl who became a saint. The year is 1412. France is a kingdom fractured, bleeding from the endless struggle against England. The French crown is in dispute, and English forces occupy much of the north, including Paris. In the small, isolated village of Domremy, a girl named Jeanne is born to a family of devout peasants. To us, she is Joan. Her childhood was ordinary, filled with farm chores and prayers, but everything changed when she was 13. While in her father's garden, a bright light appeared, and she heard a voice. She believed it was Saint Michael, followed by Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret. Their message was staggering. She, an illiterate peasant girl, was chosen by God to save France. She was to drive the English out and see the rightful heir, the Dauphin Charles, crowned king. Imagine the sheer audacity of it. A young girl with no military training or political influence, claiming a divine mission to lead an army. For years, she kept these visions secret. But as the English siege of Orléans tightened in 1428, the situation grew desperate. The voices became more urgent. Joan knew she had to act. At just 16, she traveled to the nearby town of Vaucouleurs to petition the garrison commander, Robert de Baudricourt, for an escort to the Dauphin's court. He laughed her off, sending her home, but Joan was relentless. She returned, her conviction unwavering, telling him that God's will would be done. Her persistence, and a growing local following who saw her as a prophet, finally wore him down. He granted her an escort of soldiers, a horse, and men's clothing for protection on the perilous journey through enemy territory. After an 11-day trek across hostile land, Joan arrived at the court of the Dauphin Charles at Chinon. The court was a nest of intrigue and skepticism. To test her, Charles disguised himself among his courtiers. Yet, according to legend, Joan, who had never seen him before, walked straight through the crowd and knelt before him, saying, "God give you life, gentle king." Still, Charles was wary. He subjected her to weeks of examination by theologians in Poitiers. They interrogated her, trying to find any hint of heresy or deceit. In the end, they found nothing but goodness, humility, and piety. With his options dwindling and Orléans on the verge of collapse, the desperate Dauphin decided to take a chance on the girl from Domremy. Joan was given a suit of white armor and a banner bearing the names of Jesus and Mary. She didn't lead as a typical commander, shouting orders and drawing battle plans. Instead, she was a spiritual figurehead, an inspiration. Her presence electrified the demoralized French troops. They saw her as a divine sign, and their morale soared. In May 1429, she rode into the besieged city of Orléans. The battle-hardened French commanders were skeptical, but Joan insisted on a direct assault. She led from the front, banner in hand. During one fierce engagement, she was wounded by an arrow to the shoulder. She pulled it out herself, had the wound dressed, and returned to the fight, rallying her troops to a stunning victory. Within just 9 days of her arrival, the English siege of Orléans was broken. The Maid of Orléans, as she was now called, had achieved the impossible. This victory was a pivotal turning point. It wasn't just a military win, it was a psychological one. The French began to believe they could win the war. Joan's mission, however, was not yet complete. The voices had told her to see Charles crowned. She urged the cautious Dauphin to march to Reims, the traditional site of French coronations, deep within enemy territory. It was a bold, risky move, but led by Joan's momentum, the French army swept through the Loire Valley, securing town after town. On July 17, 1429, Charles VII was crowned King of France in Reims Cathedral, with Joan of Arc standing proudly by his side. She had fulfilled her promise. But victory is a fickle thing. After the coronation, the French court's enthusiasm for war began to wane. King Charles favored negotiation and diplomacy over Joan's desire for an aggressive campaign to drive the English from Paris. Joan's influence at court started to fade. In May 1430, during a minor skirmish outside the town of Compiègne, she was pulled from her horse by Burgundian soldiers, allies of the English. The city gates closed behind her, and she was captured. King Charles, the man she had placed on the throne, made no effort to rescue her or pay her ransom. She was a political liability now, a pawn in a much larger game. The English and their allies saw their chance. They couldn't defeat her on the battlefield, so they decided to destroy her reputation. Sold to the English, Joan was put on trial for heresy in the city of Rouen. The trial was a political sham from the start, orchestrated to discredit her, and by extension, the legitimacy of King Charles's crown. For months, she was interrogated by a panel of pro-English clerics. This illiterate teenager faced down learned theologians, answering their complex, trick questions with disarming simplicity and wit. When asked if she was in God's grace, a trick question designed to trap her, she replied, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me." Despite her courage, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. Her primary crime in their eyes was wearing men's clothing, an act they deemed an abomination. Under immense pressure and the threat of torture, a frightened, exhausted Joan briefly signed a confession, an abjuration, renouncing her visions. Her sentence was commuted to life in prison. But a few days later, whether by her own defiance or because she was tricked, she was found wearing men's clothes again. She told the judges her voices had returned and condemned her for betraying them. This relapse into heresy sealed her fate. On May 30th, 1431, at the age of 19, Joan of Arc was taken to the marketplace in Rouen. She was tied to a tall stake and the fire was lit. As the flames rose, she repeatedly called out the name of Jesus. An English soldier was said to have cried out, "We have burned a saint." Was she a heroine or a martyr? The answer is both. She was a heroine who led her people to unimaginable victories, a catalyst who reshaped the destiny of France. And she was a martyr, a young woman sacrificed for political ambition and condemned by the very faith she so fiercely believed in. 25 years after her death, a posthumous retrial, authorized by the Pope, declared her innocent and nullified the verdict. Nearly 500 years later, in 1920, the Catholic Church officially canonized her as a saint. The farm girl who heard voices became an icon, a symbol of French nationalism, of female empowerment, and of the incredible power of faith against impossible odds. Her story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary figures come from the most ordinary places. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through history. If you found this story as compelling as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the past, and let us know in the comments who you'd like us to cover next. We'll see you in the next one.